Welcome to another edition of Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles. Influence is all around us, and we dive into it. People, environments, experiences, media, mentors, moments. Every decision we make, every belief we carry is by someone's influence, either by someone or something. Terry, welcome. And
Thanks,
we have a
Chet.
special guest today, and I'd like you to introduce the guest, somebody who has influenced you and you influenced them.
Yeah,
Welcome.
yeah, thank you. Kenny Maurer is our guest today. So, Kenny, welcome to Influence Today.
Hello, Terry. Hi, Chet.
Welcome,
Yeah,
Ken. Glad you're here.
great to
You
have you're a
too.
fascinating person. So, I'm going to just share a couple things so people know who you are, and then I want you to get into it. So, you're from Minnesota. I even said it correctly, right? It's like Toronto versus Toronto, Minnesota.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you got to get those.
Minnesota.
You got to get them right. You played all sports, baseball specifically, got into the refereeing world. Everybody in your family's a referee, your dad, your brothers. I mean, all you guys kind of followed the same path, which I think is fascinating in itself, that there's some influence there that's generational, you know what I mean? And you just we met through a colleague doing some video stuff that we did together, and we went to some of the games you refed here in Miami with the Heat. And I mean, you was a ref, I don't know, from 86 all the way to 2022,
Yep.
at
20,
some level.
20
Yeah.
21 really, but 22 sounds
21.
okay. That 22 is okay. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's really close. I mean, like I looked at your profile again because I kept looking at my, oh my God, this guy, man, he's been around, like, not that you're old, but man, you've done everything. Like, the games that you've refereed, the playoffs. I mean, like, I was blown away again as I looked at this. I mean, all the championship games you've been in, all the finals you went through, and not every ref gets to do finals, as you know, obviously. For doing that long at that level, and then it abruptly stopped because of COVID, and we'll get there. So I just want to welcome you to the show. I mean, you're an extraordinaire. You've been a successful businessman, still are doing what you do, and just glad you're here. So tell us a little bit about what influenced you to do this. I kind of shared a little bit of that, obviously, with your dad and everybody else, but tell your story for a few moments.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always
Sure.
nice to talk with friends, and I still enjoy talking about how I became a referee. And again, we'll get into it. It didn't end the way that I wanted it to, but no, I started because of my father, Terry. My dad was my idol. My dad was the most important man in my life. My mother and father. I was raised in a good Catholic family, and my dad, ever since I was can remember, would leave the house on Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights or Friday nights or Saturday nights, and he'd go referee high school or college basketball. He'd referee high school and college football, and that was on top of he was a high school football and baseball coach. So ever since I can remember, I would go sit in the stands, and he was so it was huge for me to hop in the car with him and drive to a city and sit in the stands and go in the back of the back of the building with him, and into the locker rooms and meet his referees and then go into the stands and watch him referee. I was so proud of him, and I love my
Mm.
father. So that's how I started, and he was a big influence in my life, and so when I became like I was my first year in college, I took a referee class, and I didn't know anything about it. I was taking it just for the credit, and back then I was an athlete, and I did, have wasn't that I didn't respect referees because I did because of my fathers and my uncles, but I didn't want to be a referee. I was still a ball player, but I fell in love with it right away, Terry. There was something about I don't know. There's something about being a part of a game like that. Being instrumental in seeing to it that the game was that was called or refereed fairly, so that that night the best team won or hopefully won, and then I got to referee with my dad, got to do
Wow.
B squad games, and then I refereed high school games with my dad, and then I went on to referee colleges when I was like 21. I went to my first NBA camp when I was 24. I was hired when I was 30. and I spent 37 years in the NBA. So I mean, it's yeah, it's a story I'm very proud of. I referee with my uncles. I then referee with my brothers, and I still do referee high school football with my brothers. Once in a while we get together, and it's it's been a great it's been a great avocation for me. While not the most important thing in my life, refereeing and being associated with sports was very prominent in our family.
That's awesome. I mean, I know we went to one of the games here at the Heat, and we got in there, you got us in there, and we watched you, and then we'd see you on TV, and I've seen you for years. So I knew who you were from, my TV, but it was really cool to get to meet you and hang out and do some video work together. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you've refed some of the greatest players in our era from the 80s all the way to, a couple of years ago. So what was that like? I mean, how did you get used to that? Like, was it just okay? These are just normal guys.
Well, I used to when I was growing up. I mean, the NBA, as we all know, before Larry and Magic was not a prominent sport in the
Right.
United States. I mean, very they couldn't even get nationally televised games televised at the time they were actually playing. I mean, and then they became prevalent somewhat on Sunday afternoons. And I remember sitting in front of the TV watching those games with my dad, and I just used to love to watch the Celtics or love to watch the Lakers or I used to love to watch Earl Monroe when he played with it with
Mm.
the Bullets and then with the Knicks. And I used to I who and Earl has now become a good friend of mine. What a wonderful man he is. And so I used to love to watch that, and I used to dream of someday doing that. And back then, nobody in Minnesota had ever refereed in the NBA, and everybody thought it was impossible because you had to be on the East Coast or the West Coast. You had to be in New York or Philly or LA, and I didn't really understand why that had to be the case. And so I used to love to watch those players play. And then when I actually became part of the staff in 1986, I mean, it had changed before that, but you can't. I remember some referees saying, "Hey Ken, you're no longer a fan. Quit watching the dunk. Maybe you should try to get a play right." I mean, it was like you can no longer be a spectator. You have to referee the game from a referee standpoint as opposed to a fan standpoint. And so I had learned to do that some time ago. But yeah, these are the greatest athletes I think in the world, or some of the greatest athletes in the world. What they can do with their bodies, the way they can jump, the way they can run, the way they can do things, the way they can put a basketball in a little hole, and the things that they can do are phenomenal, and that's why the sport is so popular today all over the world. But so no, although I respected these players for their athletic ability, I don't know, in awe of them. That's not the right word. I knew they were great. I knew what Michael Jordan was all about. I knew what Larry Bird was all about, but I had to do my job, and I couldn't worry about how great they were.
That's awesome.
Hey,
Yeah.
Ken, I'm really interested in high performing players, high performance teams. Is there any qualities that you noticed about them that you don't get with the mediocre people? I mean, what stretches them or makes them above everyone else?
Something drives those great players. I think if they could bottle it, I think it would be something we all would like to invest in. But there was something about Magic, and maybe it was the most important thing in his world. But I mean, when you're putting together talent and putting together the will to succeed and the will to win, and it's I don't know. I mean, the great ones seem to have it. I don't know. Maybe some of the not so talented players have it as well, but it's not as prolific, or it's not as shown as much as these great players. But to see the look in their eye, and to see and the pressure that was on these great players,
Mhm.
the pressure that was on Michael, the pressure that was on Magic to succeed and to win, and if they didn't, and the pressure and the media attention and stuff, there was just something about those men. And I'm sure it happens in women's sports as well. There's something in those great athletes that just I don't know. I mean, well, I think it's true with everybody. I think it could be true with a businessman. It could be true with a referee. It could be true with a sprinter. It could be true with a businessman. There's something that's instilled in people way down in their belly that just it will not allow them to fail. And whether they become superstars or not, people that have it, I think, achieve far greater
Yeah.
than they would had they not had that.
I would love to know what we could bottle because that would be
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
That's
Yeah,
that's
wouldn't we all?
that is awesome. I mean, I hear a lot of things about consistency. They practice more. They are much more in tune. I wonder how they feel about players on the team that are not up to their standards. Have you seen any interaction like that?
Well, that's stories. Was I firsthand to that? No, but I mean the players like you read articles like Kobe or even Michael, or I'm sure a lot of the other great players. But the way they worked and the way that they demanded what they demanded from themselves, oftentimes they demanded the same thing from their teammates. And I would
Yeah,
see during games,
yeah,
and if the player was giving it everything, if the player was working as hard as those great athletes were, then of course they also had to succeed. They also had to, get the rebound. They also had to make the shot. They also had to guard the person opposite them. But if they were performing at a level that they were capable of doing, then those superstars would accept them. But if they didn't, then they weren't accepted. They I don't know what it would be. I don't know what the correct terminology was. Did they just not want anything to do with them? Well, no, they were teammates. So the great athletes also were great teammates. And
mm,
then but they just expected things from these other athletes that didn't have the talent that they did. They expected the same thing as what they expected from themselves, and that's almost impossible to achieve. So it sometimes caused frictions. I would see it, but I mean, let's face it. We aren't all blessed with talent like Kobe Bryant or LeBron James had.
Right.
wow,
Yeah, I think
that's
it's
great.
interesting too. I remember, yeah, I grew up in Indianapolis by the racetrack, the world famous racetrack. And the first time I was working with an IndyCar driver there years ago, going in there, coaching him for the Indy 500 qualifying, I was ill. Like it was like there's going to be 375,000 people here. I got one guy. And I felt the pressure, and I had to learn how to externalize that pressure, like you said, to do my job. I couldn't be more nervous than the driver. I'm trying to teach him how to perform under pressure, but it was my hometown, biggest race in the world. And I think it's awesome that you said that because it is so important that you have to detach and do your job. And I think that's true whether you're in business, you're in life, you're in a marriage, you're raising a child, your daddy, your father. We got different roles, but it's doing our job that is so important.
Yeah, I mean the people that handle pressure. You know, I don't think the average person really realizes the amount of pressure on a Tom Brady or on a
Yeah.
Michael Jordan or on a on a Kobe Bryant. The amount of pressure on, and they just seem to handle they just do. I mean, it's the pressure on a great actor to perform so that
Mhm.
that movie is successful, and the amount of money that's invested in them and invested in the franchise. And why does Steph Curry make all that money? You can say is any human being worth that? Well, evidently Steph Curry has generated a lot of money for that franchise, or they wouldn't be paying him that kind of money. So I don't behoove any player from making money, because I realize that he or she would not be making the money unless they were generating it for that franchise. But the amount of pressure that they have on them to succeed is it's unbelievable. And the great ones can handle it, and the ones and other ones they don't.
Ken, I think what you're saying is it's mindset, but I also think they're surrounded by great coaches. They must have mental coaches, physical coaches. Each coach does something specific with them. Have you seen that?
Well, yeah, you look at, like, I'm big into my what I put in my body. I'm big on into health, and I'm big into fitness. I do the best I can at staying in shape so that I could referee as long as I could without injury. Well, these players are the same way. You look at, you hear about, LeBron, and he would have a personal chef. I mean, it wasn't
Wow.
because it wasn't
Yeah.
because he was cool or thought he was cool. LeBron, it was big. He realized that what I put in my body is who I am. That's what makes me what, the amount of, fat intake, or the amount of carbohydrates, or the amount of, nutrients and stuff. And that's part of the reason why LeBron, I think, because I believe in that, is what's kept him so so healthy his entire career and injury free. So I mean, they hire professional trainers, and these are the people that go out of their way, the things that they do behind the scenes to make themselves ready to play at that level. I just don't think many people have any idea.
And I think that's the power of, we interview a lot of people, Chet and I do. We've been doing this for years, since before COVID. And, you know, you talk to people that they're willing to do the hard things. They put in the work. They're up early, they're up late, and it's like the duck in the water, so to speak. He looks very graceful as he's kind of cruising across water, but underneath he's paddling and paddling. And I know you've seen that. That's what great performers do. They're willing to do the hard work.
Well, and I also tell people, and they never look at it this way because they don't notice referees in any sport unless the referee they think made a mistake. But you have no idea what the referees do. The amount of Can you imagine the amount of pressure on the three referees last night in Game 7?
Yeah.
Watched a little bit of it. I mean, every call is scrutinized. Every play is looked at by millions of people and scrutinized. They get to look at it 15, 20, 30 times on the video replay. And that referee had to make a decision in about, 1.2 seconds. So, I mean, and they're trained well enough to make that decision. That's why they're there. That's why they're refereeing that game. But it's amazing the amount of pressure. You have no idea the amount of pressure that go back and watching tape and watching certain plays at halftime and after the game and the next day, and what did I do wrong, and what could I have done better, and why didn't I see this player? Why did I miss this play? Or should I have blown the whistle here? I mean, this is what referees do, and that's why they have the amount of time they spend watching video and training in the off season and getting themselves ready mentally and physically. They're just like the player. It's just people don't look at it because they're the necessary evil that has to be there in order for the game to be played. But I look at it in a different light.
That's great.
Can you imagine if businesses did that? Businesses just every day just go to work, 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 work. And very rarely do they do what you just said. Prepare, look, watch videos, get coaches, everything. They're just rolling. Imagine a business doing that.
Yeah, everyone in that office, everyone in that business setting. Yeah, exactly. And so, sure, you have to have talent, you have to have eye coordination, you have to be physically able to react in a split second. Some referees are better than others. Some are better play callers. Some are better with people. Some are better, handling this play or that play. So referees have different qualities, but usually the best referees, they usually do it all, and that's why they're there. That's why they're the best referees.
Let's talk a little bit about what happened, with COVID and, the whole vaccine situation that was going across the world. And I've coached a lot of different people that either was vaccinated, not vaccinated. A lot of military personnel lost their jobs because they would not get vaccinated. And you did. So tell us a little bit about what happened and where are you now?
Well, I don't think a lot of people, and I've tried to get the word out as best I can, because not for the reason that the NBA or many other people think, is I want people to know why people like me are doing what we're doing. And you got to remember, Terry, that this is 4 years later, and
Yes,
and we're talking about 2019, 2020. A lot of people can't remember what home they lived in 2019, much less how they handled COVID.
right.
But I remember I was in, I think, Atlanta, and I remember Gobert was the first NBA player on March 11th to get the COVID, get the virus. And I remember that the NBA then shut down the entire NBA in March of 2020. People didn't know what this was all about. They didn't know where it came from. There was so many things that we had no idea. And,
right.
And one thing led to another. And we all were searching for what to do or what to not do. the NBA came to, well, first of all, in 2020 and 2021, the 2020-21 season, remember the bubble was in 2020. It was
Yes.
played in Disney. And the NBA and I think the military, ESPN, Disney, they all came together and they put together this bubble, and they were able to so-called finish the end of the season and then play the playoffs. And then the next season, the 2020-21 season, didn't start till right around Christmas time. So people don't remember, they forget all that. Again, and there was lockdowns. I remember going to Portland, and you couldn't get in a restaurant. You couldn't, you walked out of the hotel, and it was there was nobody on the streets. It was just it was like it was like a war zone in many cities, and it was, people didn't know what to do. Well, everybody was searching for ideas. Well, we worked that season. And we were allowed to test, and we were allowed to, I think some days I tested 4 times a day during the playoffs that following spring in order to be able to referee. And I was always finding, I didn't know what was going on, and then the following season, which was the summer of 2021, the NBA came to our union, the referees union. Well, they came to the players, they came to all the unions, everybody affiliated with the NBA. And they basically said, they changed the 7th year of our contract to say that if you don't take this vaccine, you're not going to be allowed to referee in the NBA. They went to the players, and they tried to have the Players Association mandate that the players take the referee, and they didn't. So the NBA players were never mandated to take the vaccine. Never.
Wow.
And either we're NFL players, either we're Major League Baseball players.
Right.
So our union, and again, I'm not going to get into it. Everybody tries
Right.
to make this political, and I'm not going there. I haven't gone there, and I'm not going to go there. This to me was never political. It should never have been made political. I don't like politics. I don't like many politicians. So I mean, I've never been a political guy. I don't. I say what I think. I say what I feel, and respect other people's opinions. So I had done my research, but basically it was easy for me, Terry. I've been a Catholic my whole life. I've been a Christian my whole life. I was baptized. I received a Holy Communion. I received confirmation. I've gone to church on the road every year of my 37 years. I have faults. I've done things wrong. I've been a sinner, but I've been a child of Christ my whole life. And so when they offered this, the NBA said, you must take this vaccine, or you can't referee. They offered everybody a religious exemption. And we all, a bunch of us thought that was good. That was great. We can file this religious exemption. And back then, I knew that it was affiliated with aborted fetal cells. I knew that, and I'm pro-life. I'm a Christian. I don't believe in abortion, and that's just me. Everybody is allowed to have their own, can make up their own decision. I may look at a woman and say, well, I respect that woman. I mean, if she chooses to have an abortion, that's her God-given right to decide for herself. I may not agree with her decision, but I because of my faith. But you have to respect people's religious beliefs. Well, I was pro-life, so I knew that it was affiliated with aborted fetal cells in the testing and the development process of many vaccines. And so the NBA is trying to say that there was a different reason, that wasn't the reason why I didn't take the vaccine. Well, it was the reason. That was the reason. That is the reason. It always was the reason. And I've never changed from day one. And so I know that they take a live fetus. I know they take that fetus, and I know they cut it up. I know they take out the brain, they take out the guts, they take out your intestines, they take out your heart, they take out your arms, your legs, and they use different parts of that live fetus for whatever test or development procedures that they want to take on for that specific test in developing a vaccine. And I wanted nothing to do with that. If somebody thinks that that's okay, well, I don't, and I'm very adamant about that. And so it was easy for my wife and I. We will never, and will never digest or put anything in our system that we know had anything to do with aborted fetal tissue. And so, that's why I made the decision. And it was easy for me, Terry. It was not made. Some people say they didn't know that. Okay, well now you do. But
Yeah.
so I stand by my faith in God. I'm proud of what I'm doing. Um, there are many more people that did the same thing that I did, but have never been able to voice their reason for why they walked away or why they were fired from their job. You know, they lost their job, they went into depression. Many people suffered divorces, suicides, and this should, you know. So I'm fighting the mandates. I believe what I'm fighting, Terry, is that every human being should be allowed to make a decision for anything that's ingested into their body. They should make that decision themselves. They should, whether it be from a religious standpoint, a medical standpoint, every human being in this free country that we live in, this beautiful country that we live in, should be able to make that decision for themselves. And that's what I'm fighting for. I stand with a lot of other people in this world, and I'll never change.
No,
Great feedback.
that's a great closing explanation point, because I think that's why I respect you so much, is because it takes some guts to stand up for something you believe in that much that you're willing to risk your life. I mean,
Yeah.
this is just what goes
And
on with
career.
and
Yeah.
career and your image and all the above. So, Chet, any final word you have? Ken, I'm really just glad you
This has
able
been
to share.
fascinating, interesting. I like to do another one as we progress because there's so many topics we can cover. I appreciate
Please,
that, Ken. You,
please do, because I
yeah.
respect people like you that allow people like me to be able to voice my opinion. I always end talks like this or even discussions like this with a quote I like to read, and I know you fine men will think the same way, but the American way at its core has always been about valuing freedom above and beyond personal safety. World War II, Civil War, Revolutionary War, even the Pilgrims leaving England, they valued religious freedom above and beyond the personal safety of their dangerous voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. You don't have to look hard to find just the opposite in America today, particularly throughout this pandemic. We claim to be Americans, yet are found trading away our freedoms left and right for the facade of personal safety. It's anti American and completely opposite of the courage that has made our country so great. At the end of the day, all we have is our beliefs. That's the only thing we can take with us when we die. I'd rather be a martyr for my beliefs than a celebrated convert of someone else's. That's the way I live my life, guys. That's
Thank
it.
you, Ken.
Awesome.
Amen. That was
Great
great.
way
I
to see it.
appreciate you
Yeah.
ending on that note. Let's continue the conversation and we'll set up another meeting shortly.
I
Hey,
love it.
Terry, thank you very much. Ken, thank you very much. Thank you for listening to Influence Today. If you like the show, remember we need some stars, 5 or 6 stars. Share it with people and also comment on us. I'd appreciate that. So until next time, Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles.